and also has some resistance to Hessian fly and stripe rust. Westbred 9590 was what you mentioned. And then the other one there. I'm going to go ahead and skip this, and we're going to wrap it up with some spring wheat. And an hour and a minute.
I think this slide says it all, doesn't it?
Okay. Also, right behind it is Melba club wheat. And the club wheats aren't normally grown down here, but normally the club wheats don't do well down here. Melba is the first club wheat that I have had in the variety trials that have been competitive for yield in this area. You don't have a market, but the breeder really wants to test it down here for adaptability. We've got Tico as well, and Tico soft white spring wheat from Washington program. This variety has good disease resistance and very good tolerance to Fusarium head blight, even better than Seahawk. So these are two really good Washington lines that have been released recently. I do want to mention the brand new release, UI Cookie. And UI Cookie's released from Jen Lee Chen's program. It has really good soft white spring wheat quality. It is a little bit higher on the protein overall, but this is a higher protein for soft white, but a very good cookie and a soft white quality variety. It also is going to have better stripe rust resistance than UI Stone. And UI Stone's one of its major flaws is that it has become susceptible to stripe rust. Okay, and we can talk about UI Cookie again, but I already mentioned it. And then the last slide I want to mention here, we actually did a rye trial. And so this is a winter rye that we did with KWS Lockout. And you could see some of the SY Ovation, LCS Jet in this particular trial went over 200 bushels. Yay, I made the 200 bushel club. But you can see that these winter ryes, if you need feed varieties, also are getting close to that 200 mark. Anywhere from 150 to 184, 85 bushels per acre. So if you're interested, I put that in the book too, a little bit of information on rye. Of course, it's hybrid rye, and I've had a lot of backlash from some people to say, how dare you bring rye in? It's only at the station, and we've managed it very carefully because we don't want it to become a problem, a weedy problem.
You said forage, right?
It is forage. Did I say forage? What did I say?
Yeah, well, let's keep it there.
Oh, yeah.
When you're showing yields, grain yields for it.
Yeah, it is for forage. So best management reminders, make sure you're planting according to the right seeding rate and number of plants per acre, fertilize for expected yields. Never forget your nitrogen, never forget your sulfur. Whether it's soft or hard, sulfur is very important for end use quality of all of our varieties. Promote best practices, manage for optimum seedling health. Don't plant too deep. Get that crop up and going as fast as you possibly can. Know your market. Identify your market. Make sure you have some place to sell that grain before you plant it. And what dockage costs you the most? Is it head blight? Is it Don? Is it low test weight? What is it, the dockage that costs you most? Select your varieties very carefully because it's important to have the best start to your growing season. The variety trial results are available online at our website, so feel free to explore our website. I also have falling number data there. If you're interested in finding out which variety has falling number issues, we've got multiple years since 2013. We've got falling number data there, as well as all sorts of other information at our website. Okay, any questions? Yes?
How is the protein affected by the frost?
That's a good question. Anything that reduces test weight, and the frost sometimes reduces the overall seedling health. It probably, increases the protein a little bit. Anything that stresses the grain increases the protein. Do you guys have any?
I would lean in that side too.
Yeah.
But
Anything that's, because frost often
If yield
reduces
is
the test
lost.
weight, that means that you're increasing protein. But I didn't notice any significant differences in the protein at Aberdeen than normal. But again, if you have lower yields, you've actually over fertilized for that expected, for the actual yield, which means your protein's gonna be higher. So there was extra nitrogen available in the soil to increase your protein. So take a look at the protein data at Aberdeen, it's pretty high. Any other questions? Okay, I'm done, and we'll pass it on to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. All right, next we'll be hearing a update from the Idaho Grain Producers Association.
There's a slideshow on there. You can get me to it. Okay, I'm Brogan Darrington. I'm just a local farmer around here. I'm not a presenter, so bear with me. I don't want to be up here. I don't want to have to do this, so here we go. But, I'll keep it short. But anyway, like I said, I'm a representative from the Idaho Grain Producers Association. By raise of hands, are people familiar with what that even is? Yeah, kinda. So pretty well there our way to speak with the legislatures. They come to us. We're able to express some concerns or problems that we might have, and then they go to them and they lobby for us. So just a few, I guess, things that kind of prove my point there is, I'm not going to read this slide, but it talks a lot about how our population in Idaho is growing, and it's growing pretty rapidly. As you see, from 2017 to 2018, Idaho increased 35,000 people. A lot of the people are moving in towards Boise, Ada County, Meridian, which this kind of continues on with that. Just talking about how many people are moving into Idaho. Surprise, a lot of them are coming from California, which, I'm sure they're great people, but sometimes they have a little different perspective on life than what maybe some of us have. But they come from other states as well. Anyway, so what does this mean for us as farmers, having all these people come into Idaho? Well, back to that, they have a different perspective on life and what's important to them, I guess. And so I guess to me, it's more important now than ever to have a voice in the Capitol, because all of a sudden, they're wanting to change rules that benefits them or makes their life better. Whereas we have certain rules that are in Idaho that are in place for us as farmers to protect us. So kind of like what I said here. The IGPA mission statements, our mission to serve the grain producers of Idaho by representing their interests in the county, state, and federal levels to enhance their profitability and long-term viability. They also are partners with the National Association of Wheat Growers, the National Barley Growers. So what are some of the issues that they've done here recently? They've participated in creating the ARC and PLC safety net programs. They've worked on crop insurance and research funding. Recently they just signed a new deal with the USMCA and also the new China deal. And I know that they were involved in some of that. And I can say, I guess I know that they were involved just because they allowed me to participate with them. I'm the new guy, so I didn't say a whole lot, but it was interesting to just be a part of it. Around here, they've also talked a lot about depredation. When elk come in and do any kind of damage to irrigation, they've been working at getting those funds increased. They also talk a lot about transportation and infrastructure funding. So this just kind of shows what districts we're in here in Cassia County. We're in, for wheat, we're in District 3, barley, we're District 2. So anyway, we need as many voices as we can. It's a great program, especially for the younger farmers. It's given me an opportunity to meet new people, but also to, be able to just be involved and have an opinion on things. Just in the past year, I've been able to go to Portland to the Idaho trade, or not Idaho, sorry, the Wheat Marketing Center. I was able to go through that, and that was interesting. Honestly, the Portland tour was one of my favorite. Very interesting to see where our wheat goes and to understand why quality wheat is important. They also got me involved with Bayer, and I've been able to go to Santa Fe and to DC within the past few months for leadership programs and different things of that sort. So it's just a good way to get involved into, to have a voice in the Senate. So anyway, that's pretty well what I have prepared. Anybody have any comments, questions? There's a couple of the big dogs in here. Do they have anything to throw in? Perfect. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. That was a short and sweet update. Thank you. It's awesome. We're going to now go back to Juliet again. She's going to be talking about diseases in cereals and how to manage that appropriately. And I believe everyone got the handout? I hope. Okay. Awesome.
Which one? That one? Nope, that's extension variation. I'll let you put it up there.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking a little bit about diseases this time. I'm not going to, we're at the end of the day, so I'm not going to belabor too much, but there's a multiple reasons why I wanted to give you this handout. Where's the pointer? Here? It's over there. So I want to make sure that one of the biggest issues that we understand in small grains production is grain bridge and weed management. Okay, so if you have heard me speaking before, you've also heard me talk about multiple modes of action. Whether we're talking about weeds or we're talking about herbicides or we're talking about fungi and diseases, it's important for us to use multiple modes of action when it comes to controlling diseases or controlling weeds. Now, we don't have a weed scientist in small grains currently, which is why I'm also bringing in a little bit of information on weed management. Plant Sciences is hiring somebody to replace our weed specialist at Twin Falls, Kimberly. And Dr. Don Morishita retired last year. So there's not too many people that can fill his shoes, but we're replacing his position hopefully, and so hopefully sooner rather than later. But the simple fact of the matter is that consistent use of herbicides in any crop or fungicides can result to resistance management issues. Okay, so it's important for us to manage weeds from a green bridge perspective as well. So we want to make sure we're controlling the green bridge. The green bridge is a weed of wheat. A green bridge can be regarded as volunteer wheat or volunteer barley. It is really important to reduce the impact of diseases and insects by trying to control those grassy weeds or grassy wheat and volunteer barley. So the information that I've presented to you as a handout is just a reminder of how important it is to control weeds. The definition of a weed is a plant out of place, which can be wheat and barley. I have seen some of the worst rhizoctonia following an application of Roundup on volunteer wheat after the next crop was planted. So somebody decided they have a very messy field, they're doing no-till, they go in and they plant wheat, and then they came back and sprayed Roundup to kill out the wheat. Well, as the weeds dying, the newly emerging crop came out and was absolutely decimated with Rhizoctonia. So weed management even needs wheat management or barley management when it comes to volunteer. We often have aphids build up on weedy volunteer that then serves as a source of either aphids or barley yellow dwarf inoculum to move to the next crop. So the handout is there to remind you that if you have any issues with the development of resistance in our weeds, whether it's wheat or weed species, I know there's a lot of buildup of resistance to kochia. Our new weeds person should be there to help manage that, but it's also important that we use multiple modes of action to control those weeds. If you find that you have weedy species of wheat and you would like some advice on controlling it, if you can't get a handle on it, please feel free to contact us so that we can assist you in managing that and hopefully reducing any of the impact associated with weedy plants. It's okay? So, any questions on that handout that I gave you? Again, call me if you have any questions. This is a multiple state effort to make sure that we have a good handle on volunteer, on herbicide resistant wheat or herbicide resistant weeds, and also managing disease. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to focus on that. When we talk about Greenbridge, we're talking about the overlap of different cropping cycles or crop generations within a year. You have the constant availability of living green host material on a given crop, and our potential problems are multiple. Whether we talk about Russian wheat aphids, barley yellow dwarf virus, foot rot with Rhizoctonia, whatever kind of foot rot, soil-borne fungi, stripe rust, wheat straight mosaic virus, take-all, barley mealybug, Rhizoctonia pythium, like I already mentioned. Planting into, even following alfalfa, if you've got wheat in your alfalfa or barley in your alfalfa that you haven't controlled, that is a perfect carryover mechanism if you come in after alfalfa and plant a new crop of wheat or barley. Okay, so again, it's really important that we manage those grassy weeds, whether it's volunteer wheat or barley or weedy species of grasses like goat grass or rye, farrow rye. Okay, so when we talk about crop rotations, this is another way to really reduce the impact of diseases and weeds. We talk about longer rotations between types of crops, and hopefully you have a greater breakdown of residues and disease organisms, disruptions of pest life cycles. So we talk about broadleafs versus grasses. That is a great way to get rid of your grassy weeds by planting a broadleaf crop and using a different chemical, right, to control the grassy weed species. We have multiple modes of action of our herbicides and herbicides. So broadleafs versus grasses also reduces our disease impacts, okay? The more you can rotate, the better you can control weeds, the better you can reduce your diseases. Wheat versus barley and corn. Yes, some people use wheat and barley as a rotation. Sometimes they use corn as a rotation. There are some diseases that can go from corn to wheat and barley and really have an impact on the yield. A lot of times what we're seeing is nearby corn with a high buildup of aphids transferring barley yellow dwarf into our newly planted wheat crop. Winter crops versus summer crops, believe it or not, could be a rotation because there are different diseases that affect our winter crops than the summer. So sometimes even that can be considered a rotation. And then we talked about variety versus variety. It's important to rotate varieties because 10 years after planting Brundage on the Fort Hall Reservation resulted in a buildup of Cephalosporidium stripe. Cephalosporidium stripe usually never occurs down here. But 10 years after planting the same variety, no rotation in variety, you result in having a higher disease pressure. West Red 936 is a very good incidence of a variety that was so widespread and planted year after year after year that we had to build up a bacterial blackjack on that variety. It became susceptible to stripe rust. So again, variety can be considered a rotation, because if you have 2 or 3 varieties planted in one year, you're also stretching out or mitigating some of the risk associated with one variety being susceptible to one frost event at one time. So you can even consider that as kind of a rotation. And then I already talked about fungicides and herbicides. There are fungicide-resistant Pythium in southeastern Idaho, okay? So that means metalaxyl and mefenoxam doesn't work. So I've had to recommend changes into a new chemistry called ethibosum to reduce the impact of early season Pythium in barley or wheat. So fungicides and herbicides, again, are very important. So I already talked about the herbicides. So what I want to do with this inverted series of triangles, instead of just talking about the 3 arms of disease, we're talking about the 3 arms of pest pressure. As you increase your crop diversity, you're actually decreasing your pests. Okay, so I think this is a good way to visualize. If you have high pest pressure, it's often the result of very little crop diversity. Okay, so this comes in many, many different forms. And we can talk about barley yellow dwarf. Arash Rashad already mentioned barley yellow dwarf and how we had a problem with it in several different years. It can have very serious consequences for yield depending upon the year, but you get smaller plants, stunted plants, plants with yellowing and reddening around the edges. So it's really important to reduce that green bridge to control our weedy volunteer. Okay, some of the other examples we can talk about with continuous production of small grains. In Soda Springs, we have problems with barley mealybug, and it is there every year. Some years you have to find it. Yeah, it's harder to find it. We can find it in Soda Springs. We can find it in Ashton. We can find it on Antelope Flats, past Ryrie. It is very obvious when you have droughty conditions. And so the impact of this little bugger is multiple, because it's taking the photosynthate from the crop, but it's also injecting toxins. And it looks like it completely reduces any of the roots. And in a good strong wind, it's like the whole field will just fall over. So this is a huge problem. Also, in conjunction with that droughty issue is you can see some darkening of the stem bases, and that's a Fusarium crown rot. That's also considered a problem in irrigated grain when you have drought stress under irrigation, especially on sandy soils. So the other thing I want to mention is cereal cyst nematodes. We'll briefly talk about that because cereal cyst nematode is a consistent problem in southeast Idaho. It is also a problem in the Magic Valley and over towards Twin Falls, but it's less of a problem because of better crop rotation. Cereal cyst nematode really proliferates when you have multiple years of barley or wheat. And one grower that I was working with last year had a field that he had barley in for 30 years straight. And yes, he had cereal cyst nematode issues. So you can see a little bit of delay in crop maturity here. It's less tillered, it's shorter. This particular plot doesn't show, but just a slight change in color. I think you can see this slight change in color. And sometimes people say, well, my fertilizer skipped here. I'm going to blame the fertilizer guy. It's not my fault. In actuality, it's just cereal cyst nematode, which is important to understand your crop rotation and what's in your soil. Okay? What are you looking for? Okay, you're looking for yellowing of the crop, but you just need to take your shovel with you everywhere you go. Okay? Just do a little digging. The roots here become bushy, and if you look really closely, you can see right in here where you have a proliferation of the root system into a series of knots. Okay, here's 2 little cysts. You can see the little white cysts there. Those are easy to see about flower or late boot to flowering. You can really easily see those, but as the crop matures, those little white cysts become brown, and then they just look like another fucking dirt. So it's really important to figure out what you're looking for in the roots as far as the abnormalities of the roots. It's also important to know to be able to visualize that pest, that little white female, because as the plant matures and it becomes brown, the root knots are still there. You can still find the root knots. Okay, so this is a good example. There was a farm that we worked with up in St. Anthony, and we could document 50% yield loss under irrigation, which is huge. Okay, a lot of our plots were showing 30% yield loss, and pretty substantial. Now, we don't recommend Temic. Obviously, we can't use Temic, but that was a good way to try to reduce the nematode pressure so that we could see the impact, reduce the nematodes and see the impact on yield. And we were able to look at 32% grain yield differences, as well as differences in tolerance for different varieties. So the CCN yield reduction can be substantial, whether you're talking irrigated winter wheat or you're talking rain-fed spring wheat. But the interesting thing to note is that for winter wheat, you require quite a lot more nematodes per gram of soil to reduce grain yields. So this is grain yield over here. You've got really high good grain yield. You keep adding nematodes till you get to 80 nematodes per gram of soil, and you can see substantial yield reduction. Similar with spring wheat, but the interesting to note is instead of 80 to 90, you're looking at 4 to 5 grams of soil or nematodes per gram of soil to reduce yield by 10%. Why is spring wheat much more susceptible than winter? Because the nematodes are hatching in the spring when the temperatures warm up and the soil moisture comes in. It's not that the nematodes aren't infesting the winter wheat, but the winter wheat already has an established root system and can withstand a lot more nematodes. Obviously, a lot more nematodes per gram of soil are required to reduce the yield similarly to spring wheat. So this is what that little white female will look like. And of course, we say sanitation is the most important factor, but how can you sanitize your fields or your equipment when you're moving from field to field during potato harvest or sugar beets? You're just on the run. And when you're on the run, you're not going to wash down and clean your equipment every time you move from to the next field. So sanitation is already too late. The good news about this particular little letter is that crop rotation does a really good job of reducing the impact. So even 1 year out of cereals into a broadleaf crop can substantially reduce the impact of this soil-borne nematode. Host resistance is also very, very important. We saw LCS Odyssey show very good resistance to this particular pathogen. We also showed where Westbred Rockland also had very good resistance to this pathogen. Unfortunately, Westbred Rockland also had significant resistance to yield. And so that one was kicked out. So I'm going to skip over this and just talk about some of our varieties that had really good resistance. Westbred Rockland. You can see that Jefferson UI Stone did not have good resistance. This is supposed to be the number of nematodes per root. So the more nematodes that you have per root system, the higher the impact of on the yield, and usually the higher reproduction means continued fostering of the high pressure of the disease. So we also measure tolerance, which is when you plant a variety in an infested soil, can it still produce a yield? And so tolerance is different than resistance. And some of the varieties like UI Stone that were not resistant still was able to yield pretty well in the presence of the nematode. So that was tolerant. Some of these other ones are not tolerant at all. Classic, Westbred 936, Bullseye, not tolerant at all. The nice thing to note is there's LCS Odyssey, very resistant. Here we have ABI Voyager, not resistant at all. We had new cysts of 75 cysts per root system, per plant, 75 new cysts. Then you could see the percent yield increase from nematicide. Voyager had a huge yield increase. Did I say that right? Or is it huge yield increase when you apply nematicide? So it really knocked down the nematodes, which showed that that variety is very, very not tolerant of high numbers of nematodes. So not tolerant, not resistant. If you have cereal cyst nematode, ABI Voyager is not the variety to plant, which goes back to saying know what's in your field. Good rotation practices, you won't ever call me. Bad rotation practices, it's what do I have in my field? Come help me. Okay, so I just want to do a quick disease thing. You guys are probably pretty tired of me harping on about fusarium head blight and talking in general today. So if you have any disease questions, feel free to give me a call or email me or just come up and ask me a question. So thank you.
All right, before you take off, I know you're excited to get going, but we actually still have a few more door prizes up here. And as I'm up here talking, I hope that all of you have been able to fill out our survey. As I'm going through these last tickets I'm going to pull, please, if you haven't, quickly go through that, give us some feedback, help us help you for next year. All right. So last three digits, 046. 046. It was 046, sir. All right, going again. 050. All right. Looks like we got a couple of bags and a hat.
Bags in the hand.
005. 005.
Already have one of them, so just go with the hat.
Yep. Yeah. Awesome. 065. 065. The guy wearing Idaho State.
That's it.
All right, the last one. Till next time. 003. 003. Right on.
So if you'll just leave the surveys on the table, we will gather those up. You don't need to stack them anywhere. Just leave it on the table and we'll gather up the surveys. Thank you, guys.
Right on.
Thanks, Grant.
Yeah.
Did it like a champ.
Not the best MC, but dude, oh, good enough. Good enough.